Hello. Today I'm going to be talking to Wolfgang Schaefer and JP Kuehlwein, both authors of Rethinking Prestige Branding. I found this book about a year ago when I was reading about branding, marketing, and things like that to develop my own understanding about these concepts so that I can implement them for my two businesses, Aquila and International School of Tailoring. Through some luck, I actually got in touch with one of the writers, that's Wolf Schaefer, and we came with the idea to do an interview about the contents of this book. I found the book extremely practical, extremely useful, and easy to understand and applicable to not just the luxury market, but to pretty much any type of business that you might be in. Now, before we go into the contents of the interview and actually start the conversation, I will introduce both authors and then we'll take it from there. So, I'll begin with Wolfgang Schaefer. Wolfgang Schaefer is founder and CEO of 12 Consulting, an international brand consultancy focused on developing narrative strategies, especially for prestige brands. For the past 25 years, Wolf has worked as global chief strategist with most of the world's top marketers from LVMH to P&G, that's Procter & Gamble, Pepsi or Unilever, to Estée Lauder, Coty, Swarovski, and many others. In 2015, he published his first book, Rethinking Prestige Branding. His latest, On Brand Elevation, came out in January 2021. Wolf is a regular speaker at conferences and universities in the US as well as Europe and guest professor at XU University, Potsdam. JP Kuehlwein is the founder of Ueber-Brands, a consultancy that helps owners elevate their brands to make them peerless, priceless, and profitable. He previously was executive vice president at Frederick Fekkai & Co., a prestige salon and retail haircare business, and served as brand director and Global Director of Strategy at multinational Procter & Gamble based in Germany, the US, Singapore, Hong Kong, and finally in New York. He has a 25-year track record of translating consumer and cultural insights into propositions that generate more than $1 billion in sales today. Gentlemen, let's have some fun. I would like to begin our conversation by asking you about your backgrounds, and Wolf, perhaps we could start with you. And then I would like to know from both of you how you came to the idea to write this book together.
Well, my actual background right now, you see, is my office and home. But I started out actually in what was then still called advertising. I worked for a big agency. And over the years, I started out as a strategic planner. Very, very early on, actually, I worked as a creative director, but then I moved into strategic planning and eventually became a brand strategist, working for many of the global top companies, mostly out of New York, but always on a global level. So it didn't really matter where I was. And that's also how I met JP, because he was at the time working also in strategy for P&G, which was one of our clients. And so we started thinking about why P&G has such a hard time, or often did have a hard time, succeeding in premium or prestige businesses. And that's how the whole thing got rolling. But over to JP.
I guess Wolfgang did my part for me. So yes, I worked at Procter & Gamble for almost a quarter century. Oh my God. And started actually on the other spectrum, if you like, or the other end of business, which is in finance, particularly during the time of acquisitions at Procter & Gamble. Worked across the world, started in Europe, focused on Eastern Europe, then in the US, then developed markets, as we called it, or Western markets, if you like, and finally developing markets before I landed in that corporate strategy role. So my previous roles across markets had been in marketing. And then one of the key questions in strategy was, how can P&G sweeten its profits? And the conventional answer was pricing, promotions, etc. This was during 2008, 2009 crisis. And when I looked at some of the analytics that we generated and the brands, I found that a secret, if you like, of other companies and brands was that they were able to create value way beyond the utilitarian or functional benefits and performance of their products. And that it must be in the meaning of these brands to people beyond that functional and utilitarian benefit. And that's, as Wolfgang said, when we started to dig into how do they do it? How does this come about? How come people value these items for their meaning as much, if not more so, than for what they represent as material, if you like, or their material values?
I understand. And so what I'm curious about is, well, how did you guys come up with the idea to formulate this in a book? And also, which one of you did which parts? Was there any specific roles you had in writing the book?
Actually, yeah, there was. So how it came as a book was we already actually published a book for within P&G. It wasn't on the level that the one that we finally published was, but we put it in bound form and laid it out and really made it easy, because we thought the form, which is one of the key learnings, of course, when it comes to prestige brands, the form must give additional value to the function. And so the design or the presentation of the findings was just as important as not just as important, but also had like proportionate importance to the findings. And then the different roles was, because of my background, did most of the writing. JP was probably did a lot of the research, a lot of the interviews with partners. Well, we kind of mixed it actually. Certain parts also JP wrote, but more the case studies, and then I was more for because of also my academic background, more of the sociological insights and stuff.
I see. I stumbled upon this book because I was doing some research for the companies that I'm developing, and within a period of about 2 years, I read pretty much as many books on branding and marketing that I could find. And one of the things that very much appealed to me about this book was its practicality. And it wasn't something that felt distant, and it didn't feel like it was only meant for a particular industry. Whereas other books about luxury branding or prestige branding in this case were mainly about, things like fashion, watchmaking, jewelry, and things like that. But when I read the book that you guys wrote, I thought, well, anyone with a solid product and a solid plan could use these principles to elevate their brand image. And so what I'd like to begin with for the viewers who haven't read the book yet, there are 2 diagrams that your book actually begins with. And one of them is called The Evolving Role of Brands and Their Benefits. And the other one is called The Golden Star of Ueber-Branding. So we'll pull up the first diagram, and I'll just read through it, and you guys correct me if I've understood this well or not. So at the very core of a brand, there is a functional quality, which is essentially the brand is acting as a quality guarantor. People recognize the brand, they know that it's a solid product, it's got a good reputation, and so that influences their perception of the brand and the products. But then you start to add all these layers. So the next one is the social role of a brand. So it really acts as some sort of a social badge, and people can belong to a brand and project a particular image or integrate the brand as part of their identity and their lifestyle. The third layer that you have in this diagram is the emotional aspect of a brand. And not every brand succeeds in this because it's a very difficult aspect, I guess, and it requires time. But at some point, a brand will or should create an emotional connection with their customers or people who do admire the brand, even if they're not necessarily customers. Then we have the cultural aspect. Obviously, when a brand gets big and stands the test of time, it certainly integrates into modern culture or sometimes even nostalgic culture for the older brands. And then at the very end, it starts to get some sort of a philosophical aspect, and that's when the brand really turns into a myth. Now, the last time we spoke about this, Wolf told me that this is not something sequential. It's not that, oh, it's first this, then that. It's a brand at the same time trying to have all these qualities together. Is that somewhat correct?
Yeah, Reza, I actually wanted to comment on the comment you made, or the observation you made on the practicality, which relates to this framework as well. I guess it's based on the fact that, as Wolfgang said, we started from truly creating a guide, instructions, direction, strategy for practitioners. That was the base of the book. So it was written with the intent to guide people through how to build this brand, which then gets me to this beginning framework, which in class, when I teach at Columbia, I always call the onion to make it easy and memorable. And apparently it works, because then throughout the rest of the class, everyone talks about the onion. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, yeah, I remember. At the basis of it, and what we can't forget, and what people often forget actually when they work on luxury and lifestyle brands, is the functionality of the product. Many, if not most products, do have an important function to them, even if they are important status symbols. Let's say handbag. It can't fall apart. It must be incredible craftsmanship. It must be what people usually summarize as quality, and then you need to dig into it and see what it truly means to them. But that kind of feel of people having labored over it, paid attention, the perfectionism, all of that. So at the very core, it does have a utilitarian benefit. It must deliver on a function. It must represent what it's supposed to be from a functional perspective. But then very quickly, as you laid out, there are these layers on top, these meanings, and they are informed by our social context, how people look at us. They are informed by what we want to be in terms of our identity, what we want to reflect. And that's where these products can take on additional meaning. A meaning about the status you have, the sophistication of your choices and your tastes. Could even be reflecting your values. Think of somebody wearing Patagonia, okay, and all that represents socially and as far as values goes, versus, let's say, Versace. We immediately assume those to be very different people, et cetera, et cetera. And as you say, and as you quote Wolfgang, it's not built one after the other. Let's first check the box on functionality, make sure we have a social kind of meaning to it, et cetera. It really comes in one package and is often within the reasons of why this product and this brand came about in the first place.
The only thing I would add to what JP said is that sometimes actually today, or always, it can happen in certain categories that there is a cultural value before or without ever there being a true functional one. Just think of brands like Supreme, which didn't do anything other than creating fashionable items or hot drops that don't have any functional added benefit that any other t-shirt has, just that it has like a Supreme logo on it. And that runs for a lot of fashion brands particularly, but also sometimes in other categories where, yes, you serve the base benefit of the category, but nothing that goes beyond really the base, Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's absolutely true. The one watch out, and maybe that's based on recency here working with a startup, is not to go all the way to saying the product really doesn't matter.
Oh, no, yeah.
I just take any made in China t-shirt that falls apart after 2 days, because people don't want to be found out in terms of they got me. I fell for the status value or social significance of it And I now realize I got woken up that this is a very badly made product. That should never happen.
Absolutely. Unless it's contractual, unless both are in it for the fashion value and never even claimed to have any additional value. If you claim to also have a certain crafty quality, then you have to deliver on it, Then you can't just fake it. But if you never even claim to, if you say like, it is a white t-shirt, but if you're stupid enough to buy it for $500 because it has a Supreme logo printed on it, then go for it, And it's fun, and it's just a game, that people play.
Yeah, understood. And when I looked at this diagram, this onion diagram, it instantly resonated with me because it gave me a contextual framework. And for someone who isn't really, I never studied branding formally, so I'm learning as I'm testing things out and gaining experience with the companies that I'm developing. But it gave me some sort of a framework, and it took the whole concept of branding away from just plain frequent advertising your logo or your website or whatsoever. And so it really gave some depth to the concept. Now, the nice part is you actually use this framework, but then you add another layer onto it, which is essentially the greater part of the book. And those are the 7 principles of Ueber-Brands. Now, we'll just bring that diagram up, and there are these 7 principles that you discuss in depth in the book. Again, extremely insightful and practical, but I'll just read through them. So it all starts with a vision, and then we get the first principle, which is mission incomparable. It's very difficult to start a company or a brand if it doesn't stand for anything or if it's not aiming towards any specific direction. But then it moves on to the relation part with the customers, and that's where you introduce longing versus belonging. Not only do people want to be part of your brand, but they also need to have some sort of a desire for it. Then you move on to unselling. I find this part probably the most fascinating part of the principles. And then you go to the core of the star, and that's when the brand really has to turn from myth to meaning. And I guess we'll discuss this a little bit more in depth. Then we get into the action part. 5, behold, love this one. Also the title. There should be some sort of a product which is at the core of the offering of the brand. Some iconic product that people can relate to and is somewhat consistent over time, even though it can be modified to kind of like be moving along with the times and not date. And then at the organization level, you have living the dream. You cannot fake it. You have to be who you say you are as a brand. And then at the end, there is growth without end. Now, what I've done is as soon as we knew that we were going to create this interview together, I put out a few posts on my Instagram asking some of the followers I had and some of the friends that I had there what they were really interested to know or to find out about branding. And so I got a bunch of answers, and then what I tried to do is I sorted all the answers so that they would be compatible to as many principles, almost the 7 principles in the book. So I've got a list of about roughly 15 questions. I'd like to go through with the questions with you guys, and at the end of each principles, I'd like to do a do and don't summary with you. So if you're ready, we can begin with mission. Jeremy asks, I'm planning to start a business. What steps do you recommend I take to discover my purpose?
It sounds really simple, but it's not that easy to do. Sit down and think about, why are you in this business? Why are you doing what you're doing? And think in particular about the elements and the parts that go beyond I have to survive, I have to make money, I want to become a unicorn, I want to exit and sell to a strategic investor or anything of that kind. What are your motivations beyond the, living, making the money, making a living out of it? that pushed you into this particular direction and that pushed you to do things the way you do it. It's a little bit of self-anthropology in terms of making the non-obvious visible, the invisible visible, in terms of why am I doing it this way? It can be done in many other ways, etc. And then build back into probably there is a driver, a mission, a vision, an understanding of the world that I want to convey, that I want to bring people. And it could be joy, it could be creativity, it could be indulgence, it could be improving the world in some ways. There's a whole spectrum of things, but that is probably where you're going to start to find the DNA of your brand and start to put together, we call it the left brain side of your brand, the mission, the vision that takes you there, that makes you want to execute it and makes people who buy into your brand want to follow along, follow your path, join you in that.
But just as JP said, it is basically kind of like a self-therapy. And that's a little difficult because, editing or analyzing yourself is like tickling yourself. It doesn't quite work. You need some distance.
Wolfgang will hold your hand. It's his special.
Yeah, either that or you find, yes, when I'm there and depending on the person. But no, it's always, it's just like simple things like finding, talking to your friends, talking to your business partners, talking to people that you've worked with, your colleagues or whatever, previous colleagues, talking to your bank, the ones who financed you or your investors, like what do they see in you? Because it may be easier for them to discover that passion point that you have, that you certainly have when you start a business. Because, if it's just about making money, you always find easier ways to make money than starting a business. So there must be something that gets you passionate about it. And sometimes it's easier to see from the outside.
Yeah, very helpful. And the way I did it for myself is I always asked myself, would I want to do this even if I didn't have to do it for the money? So if I had all the money in the world, would I still want to engage in this business? And if not, well, what would I want to do? So it resonates, your answers resonate with me as well. Okay, well, question number 2. Federico asks, I started my business after being fed up with my previous workplace. I never had a mission in mind apart from paying the bills, just as you just now said, JP. How should I continue building my business?
That never holds true. You never start a business just to pay your bills. If you just want to pay your bills, become a hedge fund manager or just like sell insurances or something like that. It's a much faster way to get money. If you build your business, and you know that, Reza, better than anybody, it takes a long time until you can actually harvest some fruits, and even then you're still involved. So you have to dedicate yourself 150% all the time, and so that nobody does that just for the money. But I think it's again like JP said. Think about also your own your life story that has gotten to your point, because I think there's always something in your biography that is interesting. If not at the very current point, but how does your biography and the cultural and societal developments, how do they crisscross and overlap and come to a certain point that then made it happen? It's like. There is this beautiful quote from Goethe, actually. At the moment of commitment, the universe conspires to help you. And that's what happens also when you do start a business, There's the things coming. Yes, you have an impulse, but then something from the outside comes. And when you look at those facts, try to analyze like what were the outside factors that helped me actually start the business. You'll probably find the story that's hidden within, or the mission that's hidden within.
What I heard of the question was also, oops, I didn't have these big ideals when I started. When I started my business, I was just fed up in terms of, wow, there was negative energy. Is that a good reason? And you know what? Actually, a lot of the interesting brands that are very desired come through a challenge, even negative energy, somebody had to overcome and find a new solution. Or, you know, they are still fighting against a major threat or frustration. I mean, I mentioned Patagonia earlier. It's in the eternal battle against, you know, the climate crisis and the destruction of the environment. All that to say, overcoming challenges can be a very good basis for starting a strong, meaningful lifestyle kind of a brand, even a luxury brand. Finding better solutions, finding a better way forward, not only in a functional sense, but even in terms of values, for example, or aspirations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, it also started with a lot of frustration. That was my main motivation. There was something that I didn't like, and I thought, well, if there's someone that needs to fix this, it has to be me. And that really fueled my motivation for at the very least for the first 2 years. And so what you say there, JP, it's exactly how it went for me. You know, I looked at what I was fed up with and why I was fed up with it, and really tried to turn that into something constructive. So what would your do or don't summary be on mission?
I mean, one is to have one, and I'm not being facetious here. It's often people go about their business without ever stepping back and saying, why am I actually here? Why we actually here as an organization? It's important to have some awareness because you want to secure those values. You want to pass it on to the employees. You want to use it as you think and feel about recruiting people, buying product, etc. So having it, formulating it, being conscious about it is the first step of being able to also then live it, and it will be felt more by your customers, suppliers, employees, etc. So that's a definite do. And a don't, if I add one there, is what we talked earlier. Don't make it just about the remuneration, financial part of it, which often is what people think needs to be the mission. On the other hand, also don't make it so far away from what you're doing and so general. I want to make the world happy. I want to improve humanity, that it cannot be related to what you're actually contributing, to what you're actually doing, or what customers can do with your product. So on both bookends, make sure you find a sweet middle where you can play a significant role in the life of your employees and your customers.
If I may add to that, I think what you said about not making it too generic is very good advice, because you somewhat are then forced to find a niche and to solve a problem for a niche instead of the entire universe, which on the organizational level or the strategic level helps everyone to have a little bit more clarity and focus, not only about what problem they are solving, but who exactly they are solving it for. Let's go to story to myth. Debbie asks, I have a mission, but I don't know how to turn it into a story or myth. How should I proceed?
That is a difficult one, and it's one that not often everybody's going to be able to do, because it does need some creative writing or thinking skills. And while I strongly believe that everybody is creative in some way, shape or form, some people haven't tapped it, and it's difficult for them to kind of access that part of themselves. So they might need some some third party involvement here. Because first you need to understand, how do I write a good story? So it's because it's what is not a story is just the listing of a historical facts, which a lot of companies do. When you go to their websites, they think like, oh yeah, we should build our story, but our story is not, we were founded 1890 and then we had like that, and then we had that, and then Second World War happened, blah, blah, blah. So a story is connecting the dots with drama, with a certain climax, with a certain narrative and dynamism, and that isn't very easy. And then taking that into a myth on mythical level is even more difficult, because the difference between a story and a myth is that myths are so-called meta stories. They are stories that resonate with all of us across cultures and times, because they tap into something, certain truth, unalienable truths, or desires, human desires, questions that we ask ourselves that we never get answers for. And so they are even more difficult. You need to have a certain level of cultural understanding. You have to have a certain level of historical understanding. You need to have a bit of psychology. So I think it takes a little bit more, and that you might need to get some help for. But yeah, and at the end of the day, what's important for you or for everybody who's starting their business and want to write their myth is to understand a myth is not listing your historical facts. A myth is really writing a story that resonates with everybody and tells them something about themselves or their place in the world that makes it interesting and desirable and intriguing for them.
It's definitely, I mean, it definitely is doing some kind of anthropological / ethnographic kind of exercise yourself, or with the help, like Wolfgang says, of others, can be a very good start of that. I would encourage, though, while Wolfgang's absolutely right that this is very difficult, and students, for example, find this part of the exercise as we walk through case studies the trickiest, it is also a fact that you can reveal meaningful aspects to almost any business, maybe short of some mobile cellular providers or something like that. Everyone has it in them. And that the art is to tease that out and make it meaningful and elevate it to, like Wolfgang says, what we call, or rather Joseph Campbell called, the shared dream, a dream that other people, you feel also will buy into, will want to join. I think that's the trick, and it often takes a mentor to help you do that.
One question that I just have in my mind based on your answers, if someone is wondering, well, I understand that I have to create some sort of a story, but one, who am I writing the story for? And two, what is really the purpose of my brand story? Why should I have a brand story?
The purpose is not that you tell the story. Let's say you shoot a video or you write it down, you put it on your website under the About Us, and that's it. The idea here really behind the brand myth is that it is a meaningful dream that is being manifested through everything, or at least the most important touch points that you have, whether it's your communication, your store, your people, your personality, your actions, your events, etc. And it's also not a regurgitation all of the time of the same thing. It should just be coherent in its execution around them. So, if you are, I'm taking a brand that I have top of mind right now, you're all about the joy and energy of the jungle and the creativeness and the wellness that comes out of it. There are many different things you can bring this to life, from a TikTok video to a store to a product. The important thing is, once you put all of these together, they can fit into that same dream of being able to share this joy and wholesomeness with other people. It's a meta narrative, I think, Wolfgang, you like to call it, which I like. That always appears, and everything you do fits in, but it's not this kind of 30-second commercial repeat loop of the same film.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, that JP is absolutely right. But that even when you're starting out now and you don't have a plethora of communication channels to service and to keep together, because you don't have a multi-million-dollar marketing budget yet, the story's main purpose at the core is to create something memorable, so that make it easier for people to understand and remember what you stand for, because you make it more significant and understood. We as people, we always connect the dots. We're sense-making machines. So if you give us a bag of like bullshit, we still try to make sense of it, because we can't operate other ways. So our brain always is creating stories. even if we don't give them. So if we just give them like certain points about your brand, then they still try to make a story. So it's much easier if you give them a story already, give everybody a story. And that goes also to your other question, who do I write it for? You write it for everyone, for the world. You don't just write it for your customers. You write it for the experts that will review you. You write it for your non-customers who might eventually become customers. You write it for your mother and your father and your kids. You write it for everybody because it is the true story and reason for being of your brand, and what role this brand plays in the world. And that's what the story is about.
While this is the right brained part, if you like, the other side of the mission, the logic one, in the mission, and this is the magic one in the myth, it has incredible operational value for a brand as well. Because once you are aware of, I'm making this easy, we like to use this, Harley Davidson, you are Harley Davidson, you're about the outlaw, the guy in the leather, and who's at the edge of society and what's accepted, etc., and enjoys this freedom that others would like to have. Once you know that as a brand, decisions like, oh, is our favorite color black or green? Is it leather or cloth? Is it, are we smokers or non-smokers? Are easy answers where brands that are not conscious of themselves, of what they represent and what they mean, struggle incredibly. Should it be round or square? Should it be green or red? Because it is, there is no guidance. There is no feeling, intuition as to what it should be in the absence of knowing your meaning and who you're all about and what your meta-narrative should be.
It seems to me that what you're describing is that having a story allows you to talk more about the world that you want to create instead of the product you sell. So for example, if you are selling pens, instead of advertising the literal functionality of the pens, you can talk about the nostalgic letters love letters that you used to write to your friends, or the beauty in handwriting and how much that allows you to put your character through some sort of a note. Am I understanding this correctly?
I mean, we have a very related case study, actually, I think in the first book. I'm not sure if it was the first or the second, but Moleskine, everyone pronounced it differently, which, by the way, is part of the myth, where you are in an analog world here of taking notes, where everything is becoming digital and now, totally virtual, and the metaverse. And of course, this brand is all about mission and myth, the beauty, and actually the big part of your identity, that is your handwriting. There is nothing more about you than your signature, and that is basically the unique way in which you write your name. So these people are all about bringing that back, preserving it, teaching from children to adults the beauty, but also the important part of identity that is writing, on paper in an analog way. So there you go in terms of elevating something that seems functional and frankly outdated to something that is incredibly valuable. It's peerless and priceless.
But it's interesting when you said that it's about creating a world, and that's exactly what it is. It's like bringing something to life. So the mythical core, like that you kind of make it talk about the individuality of communication, let's say, and the sensuality of communication in a different world, and thus talk about pens. That is the subject matter. But then putting that into a narrative, the point of putting that into a narrative is that you make it concrete. That this is an abstract thought, but you need to make it concrete. You need to give it a color, a flesh, like any story. Where exactly does that person come from? Did it come from the Bronx, or did it come from Brooklyn? Did it come from Manhattan? Did it come from Chelsea? Like what was the person looking at? Or what was he or she looking like? What kind of person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a story is always tangible, concrete, never abstract. And that's the whole point of it. Because then that makes it resonate with people. It takes that abstract idea that you want to sell and that you want to talk about, but it makes it relatable.
Kevin asks, is it more important to focus on my personal story and integrate that into my business, or should I focus on the story of my business and keep myself as a founder in the background?
In the beginning, you don't have a choice. It's all about you. So put yourself in there 100%. But be careful. Eventually, you need to be able to also pull yourself out. So initially go with yourself and go with your personal story, but already think about, like, what is it that I'm going to stand for? But a founder business that is centered around a person, if that is the business that is centered around a person, you need the person. But eventually, if all things go well, you'll reach a point where you want to pull back. And you shall be able to do that without the business then collapsing, because it is so tied to you that without you, it's meaningless or insignificant. So you need to be able, as you are building your business, to bit by bit pull yourself out and create the story independent of you.
Well, I actually experienced this myself. I once picked up the phone at one of the shops that I was working, and the shop was named after the owner. And as soon as I picked up the phone, the customer asked whether he could speak to my boss. And I said, well, my boss is on holiday, but I can help you out. And he just very bluntly said, is your name on the sign? And I said, no, sir. And he said, well, how could you ever help me then? And I thought, I have no answer to that. You can come back when my boss is back from holiday. So we'll book you in for that. But if you would do a summary of do's and don'ts about story to myth, what would your take be?
I want to take a stab at that?
You go. No, JP, you go.
I'm always doing the do's and don'ts. Do go beyond telling a good story or recounting your history. I think that's the biggest trap. People do understand in general nowadays that storytelling is important, but they think it's about telling, oh, then I did that and then I did that. You need to ladder it up, and you need to think about, what does it mean? Why, what were the motivations? Where do I want to go to? And like you said it, actually, Reza, best probably, what is that vision of a better future that others might share in that dream, in that hope of a better future. So I think that's a good mix of do's and don'ts. Don't make it just regurgitating your history or your motivations. Make it an aspiration that can be shared, particularly with your target audience. Interestingly, usually I get a question from students here where it's, well, what if not everyone wants to share in that dream? And I usually say that's probably a good sign, because if it's so broad and it's so general, and we come to the same side here as we had the discussion on the mission, then it's probably not a dream that is unique and very strong in terms of its energy and motivation power that it has. And not being for some people is actually a good sign, as long as not everyone is going to be hating you for your dream.
And the other thing I think that I would add to the do's and don'ts is what JP said earlier. When you write the story, don't make it always, which goes back also to the myth idea as a whole, not just the story of the myth, but don't make it all about world peace or climate change or social integration or whatever it is. It can be something very pedestrian, as just creating the best ice cream in the world or something. It can be, or have like a very unique take on tailoring, for instance. It can be something very category focused. It doesn't have to be always like the world savior.
I can already imagine someone asking, yes, but how can Coca-Cola, have as their story sharing happiness? Would you say that falls into the generic category, or they can just do that because they are so gigantic?
Got it right there. The other game you can play, actually, probably most listeners or viewers here can, is if you have very significant budgets and you are the Procter & Gamble's, Google's, Facebook's, or Nike's of the world, then you could afford to just hammer people and say, I'm happiness, and I'm, success, clean shave with me, Gillette is the success. but it comes at a very high price. It's the Byron Sharp talks about this, top of mind or mental availability and physical availability. And he says the only thing you need to do is always be top of mind when people think about a soft drink or about shaving or about cars, and then to be physically available, i.e., as soon as they go, the first dealership they see is yours. The first machine they see has your soft drink. But how realistic is that for 99.8% of brands? So if you're not in that game, you need to create pull and desire rather than push it and hammer it, try to hammer it into people's minds.
Let's talk about audience. Pierre asks, I really find it difficult to be selective with my customers. I need all the business I can find. Why should I be selective about my customers?
That's a favorite.
Don't. I think it's being selective about what you offer and what you do, and that will select its own customers. So you don't have to reject anybody at the door, but be very decisive about what you offer, and don't be everything to everybody. So if the moment you are very clear and focused on what you're offering and what you're giving and the way you give it in the environment, the story, the setup, you will automatically select. In the long run, you will automatically select your customers.
I have a very simple math for you. If you are, watching this, then I bet you that your brand, even once it's fully built out and successful as you dream it to be, I bet you that your brand will have less than a single-digit percentage share of your market, whether you are in accessories, sneakers, cars, jewelry, it doesn't matter, okay? Of the total addressable market, your brand, even if it's as successful as you dream it to be, will have a tiny fraction of a share. So why are you then so obsessed about, oh my God, some people will hate me? Even if only 20% of people love you and would kill for what you are all about as a business, as a brand, you have incredible length of runway in terms of selling your goods and being more successful than you can dream about. So it's a real obsession, this. I don't want to offend anyone. It is not real when you look at, what the real game is, because you are likely not the Coca-Cola, the Nike on the block. And so it's more about having a few people love you and kill for you and not mind about price and go the extra mile to find where you are in distribution or pay the extra shipping fee that is not for free because you don't sell on Amazon, rather than, being afraid to offend that odd person out there.
And I would say maybe it's even similar to building a network of friends. I mean, you don't try to be friends with everyone. You just simply cannot handle more than, 150 people, I think. And so similar to a company, what Wolf said was very good, that if you define very specifically what it is that you want to offer, you automatically already exclude a large part of the market, because, not everyone wants what you have to offer, but at least you get to surround yourself with a select group of people who are very passionate about what you offer. And was it, you probably know this, JP, was it so that despite the size of a company like Coca-Cola, it only had like 10% market share in the whole soft drinks industry?
That is Byron Sharp's argument. He says even Coca-Cola, there's only an infinitesimally small number of households who drinks it regularly. So go ahead and hit everyone over the head. But, I think it's a reverse argument, be loved so that people seek you out in this world that is becoming ever more crowded in terms of messaging out there,
I liked your example, Reza, when you said it's about building your friends, your circle of friends, because ultimately brand management is nothing but relationship management. So do for your brand or your business exactly what you would do in your personal life. Because ultimately it's the absolute same, you know. Be who you are, and that will select your people. Be nice to the people, and they'll be nice back to you.
Yeah.
Just be a little bit more than they are without you, and they'll come back to you, because you give them something that they don't have yet. And that's exactly the same with brands, you know. You have to like your people that you're talking to. You have to be somewhat like them so that they can identify with you. But you also have to be a bit more than them so that they have a reason to come back and get something from you that they don't already have by themselves.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, if you are selecting people who you do like as your customers, you actually get to, you know, have some passion for them as well and not just see them as customers. I can't imagine, you know, it's very difficult to be super kind and do everyone a favor if you have trillions of customers. It will never be as personal or as well, as intimate, let's say, from a business sense. But I think it's what you're saying is very clear. I think that most people will have an idea of why you should be selective. It only makes sense. Now, Louise asks, Louise or Lewis, my customers are usually wealthy individuals. I am not compared to them. How can I really understand their needs if I don't live that lifestyle?
Well, Louise, let's assume it's Louise. You know, they probably come to you in the first place because they're looking for something that they don't have, right? Mm-hmm. Let me paint a simplistic picture, but sometimes it helps, you know, particularly newly rich people, you know, who are very busy, don't have a lot of time, but have a ton of money. They want to buy into being seen as sophisticated, creative, having style, or even funny. And that's why they go to people that they think, or they think other people think, are creative, funny, sophisticated, connoisseurs, etc. So if you're an artist, if you're a gourmand, if you, if you're funny, and that is your thing, that is what they come for, not for you being wealthy, funny, you know, high net worth funny, because, you know, that is not how, you know, they look for the complementarity and the uniqueness of what you have to offer. So like Wolfgang said, be yourself. That is the reason they come for. That you will learn over time how do rich people tick, and likely fall into the trap to become a little bit rich yourself and adopt some of their habits. That's totally fine. But don't try to be like them. They'll find you out as a fraud, not really a rich person. And it's not the reason they came to you in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, like they come to you because they seek some craft specialty that you can only offer, that you have. Having said that, especially in certain categories, the style or the way in which you do certain things is half of the business. So it is important that you do also, if you're not part of that collective, if you do understand how they tick, what things are important, what color combinations go, which don't go, what cultural habits are acceptable and what aren't. Because if you're not born into it, you need to kind of learn that. You need to adopt that to a certain degree. Again, JP is absolutely right. It's first and foremost about what you can offer that they don't already have. So just mimicking them doesn't give them anything. But you also have to live up to certain expectations in terms of style and behavior and delivery. And that you can learn by shadowing people or by living in the world. Even if a half outsider, you can adopt certain practices and understand certain things better over time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely beautiful. I think this is a very interesting insight. What I'm kind of thinking about based on the answers of both of you is that oftentimes you have a complementary role with your offering to what others may not have, and also they might come to you because they want to be just a little bit more like you instead of you having to be like them, which obviously I think for whoever is building a brand or setting up a company and aspiring to become a brand, it's very motivating. You know, it means that there is a lot more you can build on and trust about yourself if you're doing the work, of course, on a high level, than actually having to worry about whether your customers like you or not. So I find that very fascinating. What would you say would be a do and don't summary for your audience?
So that you want to do again?
No, please.
Oh. I thought like, okay, I can do the do's and don'ts this time because poor JP always has to do them. I'd say do understand your audiences, do understand your category, do understand the trends and the ins and outs, learn and research all of that out of interest and curiosity, and then forget all about it and just follow your gut. Because you need to have it inside of you. You need to have it kind of like take it on, but you should act intuitively and instinctively. And as we all know, intuition is informed experience. And so you kind of need to have a certain input, but you shouldn't follow any rules or be too obvious in your attempts. You should all feel genuine and genuine yourself, and but of course with certain things in mind that are important for whom you want to talk to and who you're up against, your competition, etc., etc. So I think research, but then forget about it and follow your heart, and that in general, don't overthink. Business is first and foremost, it's about doing things, and not thinking so much. P&G, just I don't want to bad mouth, no, and I don't, there's no reason to, but big companies like P&G, let's put it that way, have a tendency to spend a lot of time in boardrooms discussing strategy. Obviously they're still doing a lot because otherwise they wouldn't be successful, but the doing is really where it comes, where strategy is nothing if not executed, you know. So thinking doesn't get you anywhere, it's what you do that matters.
I thought you're going to go somewhere else, which is also valid in this context. With mass marketers, they look at the stereotypical housewife or car driver or I don't know, pizza baker, you know, frozen pizza baker, and they want to deliver on what these people need and feel themselves into what they are and be like them. In this case, you are selling what you're all about, and so you should focus on you, the brand, first, not the customer is king. Okay, there is this customer is always right. Here, the brand is almost always right, with some of the limitations that Wolfgang said, which is, you know, don't offend them, you know, if you don't have to. But think of all the great artists, the admired designers, you know, whether fashion or other, all these brand celebrities that the high net worth rich people are buying. They usually look nothing like them. In fact, they are as different as could be. And if anything, the rich make themselves sometimes look a bit ridiculous, trying to look like, you know, street gang, streetwear kind of folks, trying to emulate their heroes in fashion or lifestyle brands.
Okay, well, let's move on to unselling, one of my favorites. Alejandra asks, I can't get my head around the concept of unselling. How can I sell something without selling it?
I'd say do it like the church. You ask for donations. So you ask for donations because ultimately your service or your product is priceless. That's in a nutshell the idea of unselling. So you put yourself on a pedestal. You don't sell yourself overtly by over marketing and promoting yourself. It's the same, put it like going back to your idea earlier, Reza, where you were talking about friends or we talked about like brand management being relationship management. You need to seduce people. So, and if you want to seduce a woman or a man, a person, you're not going to go and talk about yourself, you try to talk about them, and you talk about their dreams, and you try to make yourself a little bit desirable by pulling back, you know, never be too present, always be a little bit like manage proximity and distance in a certain way, be close, but then also pull back again so that you're a little bit unreachable. And that's exactly what you have to do as a brand. As a brand that wants to seduce people to pay a higher price. Because if you're too present, if you're too available, nothing is more boring than something that's available all the time and everywhere.
I mean, that's why, for example, Wolfgang's always late to meetings, you know, he wants to make himself rarer and more desirable.
And I leave early as well.
If you want to, you know, if your store is empty and you want to create some traffic, put a barrier in front of the entrance door of your store, ask 2 or 3 of your best friends to line up for a while, and you'll see the line will get bigger, right? I mean, there is this fear of missing out. There's the intrigue, what's going on, I want to be part of it, etc. That might have more appeal and attract more people, particularly at a higher price than a big red banner closeout sale, you know? At least as far as expectations go of what you'll find and what people will be willing. I usually use the example of the little hot dog stand in front of school. And I tell these folks, you know, if this guy didn't say Joe's hot dog, but it said, you know, le sandwich de Jojo, just that assuming, you know, of Frenchness would make people immediately willing to add $2 or $3 to that sandwich. And that might triple your profit. I'll let you figure out at home how that works. Okay. And so it is often by making yourself rarer, like Wolfgang says, by creating a little barrier and playing on what Wolfgang calls, you know, playing with the distance, etc., that you actually increase the appeal rather than needing to fear that, you know, you'll need a promotion to get people back.
There was actually staying with the sandwich shops in front of like universities and such. There, I don't know if you guys remember. Well, you may be too young, Reza, but there was a great Seinfeld episode about the soup Nazi, which actually it was a soup kitchen, a soup stand that actually existed in Manhattan, in Chelsea. Well, up almost upper west. Anyway, and he was like a Nazi. He was actually Arabic, but he behaved in a very fascist manner, like telling people, you have to line this way. And if you didn't give your order, like exactly precisely, you are out because you didn't have time to bother. So he mistreated people, and that made them come back again and again and again, apart from the fact that he also had like the greatest soup. But he was actually, it was almost a game and a joy to see what happens this time, either to you or to someone else in the line, where you screwed up again, you know, and where you were scolded.
You know, and, you could roll out the whole model here, because people who knew how to order, people who knew things that are not on the menu, but you can still order, were the insiders. You know, so you can see the whole thing. They become what we call the Uber target. I'm sure you want to talk about that later, etc., etc.
Yeah, go look it up on YouTube. I'm sure it's like the soup Nazi. It's on YouTube.
Seinfeld. Watch some Seinfeld to understand how to market luxury brands.
Yeah.
One question I had myself is, in what practical ways can a brand control its availability? I mean, are we talking about limited quantity of products sold, or are we talking about not having a physical shop, or having a very ambiguous website, or what exactly are we talking about when we say that a brand should not always be available or have too much presence? I guess that's a very fine thing to manage.
Yeah, and it's almost impossible, and that's where in the age of ubiquity and digital access does basically provide ubiquity, you know. In previous days, you had to go to Avenue Montaigne if you wanted to shop at Dior, because there wasn't a Dior shop in every major city in the world, you know. Of course, those days are over. Now they're not only in every major city, you have it at the click of your hand, even in Bum Screw or whatever you call it, you know, somewhere in Idaho. But it's so in these days, being of physical unavailability is very difficult, and it would also limit your business. And if you go to a certain point, look at Louis Vuitton. I mean, you can hardly say that Louis Vuitton is not available or plays with scarcity or rarity. In certain items, you can, to kind of like create the fashionability because you have limited editions, etc., etc. That you can still do for the brand overall. But on the other hand, I think it's much more, again, just like in any relationship management, it's about emotional unavailability. So as a brand, you need to have a certain, not a service mentality. What goes back to JP you said earlier, it's not about you doing catering to the king, which is the customer. It's the other way around. The customer also needs to do a little bit for you. The customer needs to gain access to you. And that is not necessarily physical access, although that works as well. Again, sometimes, where you say like, well, you have to wait in line and you can get in and you can get out, or certain people only get certain products because those are limited. But I think it's also, you need to build up a certain barrier where people cannot be sure. And that we call that also the velvet rope effect. When you go back to Studio 54, part of the joy, or the soup Nazi that we just talked about, part of the suspense and the intrigue comes also from not knowing what I have to do in order to be granted access. So there needs to be a certain unpredictability in the brand and something that keeps me on my toes as a customer. So I need to be living up to certain expectations in order to gain access. And there's like different ways how you can actually play that, from tiering, but that JP can talk about those.
And again, importantly, don't do it in artificial ways where you will eventually be found out about artificially pretending there is some kind of restriction, that it's limited, but it's not really limited, that it's, et cetera, et cetera. There are very nice, profitable ways in which you can naturally limit the supply and make it more desirable. I mean, there's seasonality, particularly in, foods. We have this very German example of the Mon Chéri, which is actually a mass product. But since it used to melt in the summers, it's a chocolate product with a cherry and alcohol inside. It was not available. So people hoarded it, or were really happy when it came back on the shelves, etc. It created this natural limited edition phenomenon or seasonal phenomena. The other one is companies nowadays that say, I want to be sustainable. I'm only going to produce to demand. So it is produce on demand, which naturally requires waiting, which if done right creates this anticipation, creates, bloggers saying, I can't wait for my thing to come. The unboxing originally was all about the excitement to finally have it, the lining up at Apple and so on and so on. And then Wolfgang alludes to it, the tiering where you have diffusion lines. It might be that belt, that wallet, T-shirts, shoes nowadays, etc., playing an important role. But you need to make sure, I think at one point we always said, for every reaching down, you need to reach up at the same time, So when, Porsche releases the next 4-seater family mobile, whether it sedan or SUV, they need to do something really exciting on the 911, win a sports race or whatever, to make sure that the mythical product, the icon, is being beheld and being lifted up again and being paid tribute to. Otherwise, you pull down your entire brand with it.
Yeah, that's particularly for mature brands. Gravity will take us all down eventually. And it's easy to, and of course, as you want to grow as a brand, and each brand needs to grow ultimately, you grow out and down. Just like we people do, but you want to grow up, so that's why exactly you need to build counterpoints, that lift you as you being pulled down.
Mustafa asks a very good question. I'm actually very curious about this one. It's important for our business to measure return on investment. How can we measure the effectiveness of our efforts in selling through unselling?
Oh, God, one of my dearest topics.
you know what? I mean, there's many KPIs and they're really business dependent, but I would say one is overlooked and really hurts, particularly younger startups, etc., younger brands a lot. And that is profit, believe it or not, or at least profit margin. Okay. We all understand that at the beginning you're spending, you might burn more money than you make, but the willingness to pay and thus the premium price you can charge over the generic good in your market is a very important measure. It's if you have a very attractive gross margin, if you have a significant premium, and it's clear that people are willing to pay for it because you're seeing growth, then to me, that is a very important and healthy measure financially that you're doing the right thing. Most often, you see already discounted prices, you see a very small profit margin and high negative absolute profit, or rather a loss overall. And that's the worst, but it has almost become standard as VCs in their desperation to find investment have pumped more money into brands than is good for them, because then they take the habits of mass brands and pay for campaigns and celebrity, etc., which in fact pulls them down.
Yeah, and perhaps one word on performance marketing, because this goes obviously into a performance marketing direction. There is this assumption or illusion that like performance marketing can tell you exactly how performative it is by counting those that actually clicked on your whatever it is, banner ad or email or whatever. But you can't, because obviously and this is growing finally on people. It's nothing new. There was always direct marketing, but all of a sudden it was called performance marketing, and people thought like, now we finally know which half of advertising I wasted. No, you don't, because in order for those to click eventually on your banner ad, they most likely have seen and heard of you 500 times before. And that's what made them eventually click. So you can never attribute any engagement to just that particularly stimulus that you send out. So any stimulus might at one point just hit, but it may have been influenced. And if not by 500 interactions before, it may have been just that they heard about from friends, or they saw that your product at a friend's house, etc., etc., etc. So it's almost impossible to do a true ROI kind of calculation on any marketing activity. It doesn't mean that you completely give up, but you have to, and that's what JP said. You have to also integrate in your calculation and look at the desirability that you have, the price premium that you're able to generate, where you can how your image, like track your image, measure your image. It's probably better for your business than just measuring the clicks that you generated through a certain activity.
And talking about social media, virality can be very helpful and is good. And it's great if your TikTok video breaks through, or a creator has just hit it and, they go away with a couple of 10 million clicks and all of that. But it's not what can sustain a business. So it's great to have it, and you can apply your skills by being desirable to actually have a whole string of hits like that. But like Wolfgang said, if you think about why, for example, many creators want to work on certain brands for free when they charge others, that again is my point. If they come to you and say, hey, could I work with you? I love your brand. That is nirvana, because it means the meaningfulness of your brand has gotten all the way through to them. And it's usually the videos where a celebrity wears your stuff, talks about your stuff, reads your things, watches your movie, whatever it is. naturally unobserved or as observed through paparazzi that have the strongest impact, because intuitively we as observers know, well, they must actually like it. So the brand and the celebrity or the creator play on the same level field, and you don't have these questions around, did they get a couple of $1,000,000 to wear that watch, or do they truly like it?
Yes, and I think that, you know, most of the points that we have discussed so far, and you also talk about in the book, are so closely related to how a brand is perceived that it almost becomes, you know, apart from measuring, for example, profit or demand in sales, that it's very difficult to measure how people perceive you, because it's linked to so many factors. You know, when did they see you? How did they feel when they see you? Were they busy, or were they in a good mood? Or it's very difficult to measure that. And personally, I don't know how that's done in any way. It's as if you want to measure what someone thought of you. Well, it's very difficult to guess that, you know, unless you're seeing particular patterns that are very concrete.
There are formal measures. There are a lot of formal measures. Cumulatively, they cost a ton of money. But usually for the clear ones, for the clear outcomes, you could have figured it out yourself. That Nike, for example, is among the desirable shoes, you know, or that Patagonia is being admired for its environmental engagement. I think, like you yourself suggested, Reza, if your brand, if you look at some of your best customers as your friends, they're probably the best source of telling you, you know, what you're all about, whether you're on the right track, you know, what your image is. Look at, are they proudly spreading the word for you? You know, those are the indicators of brand strength. And if so, what are they saying about you? Those are the things. If you're in tune with your social cultural environment, I think you'll get a good sense of where your brand is.
Very true. What would you do as a summary, do and don't, on unselling?
I think in this case it's fairly easy. You should create pull and don't push too hard.
Do seduce, don't
and
sell.
don't sell, exactly. Or in marketing terms, don't pull, do pull, create pull, don't push. Yeah.
And by the way, it doesn't mean that you don't have goodies for your fans that excite them and that maybe, you know, bring in point of market entry, POME as they're called, you know, customers. But do it smartly. So for example, you know, have 3 propositions, a very expensive one, a middle price and a low price. You know, everyone's going to go for the middle. That is actually your key proposition. But as we said, you know, always make sure you have an icon, you have that product everyone admires, so they feel like they almost cheated the system by getting their hands on something which at the end still turns out to be a fully priced, premium priced product.
And try not to do sales if any way possible.
Right. Okay. Well, we are close to the last questions. This is about growth without an end. Miles asks, as I learn new things about my business and mission, I feel the need for change. These changes are sometimes big and based on strategic pivots. How can I change or refine the mission of my business without the risk of being inconsistent?
Pivot is such a popular word for startups. I mean, basically, it means like you try one thing, you find that it doesn't work, and then you try something else. But instead of calling it, you know, I failed with this one, I start something else, you call it a strategic pivot. Be careful not to abandon something because you are more impatient than your customers, your investors, etc. Then you might not be in that business for the right reasons in the first place, as we talked originally. Too many founders, when you ask them, well, why do you do that? Basically give you an answer in terms of, I had this great idea coming out of business school, my MBA, you know, and, you know, they want to do the strategic exit in the next 3 to 4 years. that's usually not a good reason to be in business. Okay. And it makes the pivot too likely in terms of, oh, this doesn't seem to go anywhere. Well, maybe instead of, opening restaurants, I should change motor oil in performance cars. On the other hand, I'm almost doing the do's and don'ts already here. On the other hand, a business can also not stand still. So you have an iconic whatever shirt, and now you want to be just a tuck-in shirt because that works so well. Men love it, okay, to wear their shirt outside. If that's all you are, it might become limited. Look at how do you evolve. And that's where the mission and myth should help you guide, because that is usually bigger than any particular product category, geography, okay, or customer group, and should give you a good avenue. Meaning is much broader than material. So when you look at meaningful or lifestyling brands that give identity, they can all of a sudden become flower shops, hotels, etc., because that meaning translates to hospitality, to a style you wear or you live in. It can be furniture, etc. So look to your mission and myth as to where the direction can go and what expression it can have.
So in a sense, what you're really saying is that as long as your mission is, or your story perhaps, is something that can sustain itself through changes, then it doesn't really matter what kind of business change you have to make, as long as it kind of like is coherent with your story, unless you're changing your entire story. Is that correct?
Yes, I would even go a step further. I'd say you have to make changes. Nothing is more boring than staying the same, and it doesn't work in our fast-paced life anyway. There's even people saying that every category is now a fashion category. It doesn't matter what you're selling. It always has to evolve. It has to kind of present itself in a different light. But staying true to yourself. It's just like yourself, you don't wear the same clothes that you wore like 5 years ago. You probably have a different haircut. Things change, context changes, certain signals change, certain whatever behavior patterns change, yet you can still stay true to yourself as you change. And that's the key, I think. And that's where the mission and the myth help you.
Okay. Elma asks, I hear a lot about luxury businesses being timeless. Is being timeless dependent on the offering or how the offering is presented to the market?
Maybe neither of the two. Timeless is about what we've continued to talk, which actually is a good thing because it's at the core, which is the meaning your brand brings. That is timeless. The dream to be a winner, or we mentioned Harley Davidson, this desire to be somewhat edgy and outlaw and at the borderline, at least, having a fantasy around that. That is timeless. The product might have to evolve from combustion engine to electric, or can be made bigger, as we just talked, and there can very well be a Harley Davidson hotel, etc. So the timelessness is not in the product, other than if you have an icon. We talked about the 911 Porsche earlier, or you can talk about any, the Birkin bag or whatever. Of course, if you have one like those, you better softly evolve that and don't abandon it. You always need to hold it up, even as you keep it fresh and in a modern context.
The idea that I get from everything we are discussing so far is that really a business is probably 90% all about purpose and story, rather than a product and whatever sale you want to make. And I find this fascinating because it unlocks so much creativity in whoever is entrepreneurial, because they like you say, if they get it right and the story is done correctly and everything is laid out, people wouldn't be surprised if there was a Harley Davidson hotel, for example, or I don't know, even a Harley Davidson ice cream. It all depends on how it is all developed. But this surely unleashes so many possibilities for any entrepreneur out there listening, that it's not just about the product. And one of the things that we have always struggled with in tailoring, especially when I was doing my apprenticeship on Savile Row, is, well, many people were more concerned about the story of, we are just here in a basement making clothes and we're not doing anything significant. And then they would make some sort of a weird comparison to, we're not saving lives as heart surgeons are. And I always thought, well, that's a ridiculous story, because first of all, you're not a heart surgeon and neither are they a tailor, and neither should you compare the two in this context. But eventually, it's never just about the clothes. It's about many more things, and I always like to think, meaningful garments for a meaningful life at the very least. And what we are discussing now only for me kind of like points to that.
Yes, I think you could argue, what's the point of a heart if you don't have any way to express it with nice clothes? So, so you need
Dangerous.
A smooth operator.
like Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde once said, only shallow people don't judge by appearances. You need the appearance side of life, the executional side of life is just as important as the essential side of life. So it's like, yes, the heart is important. The very important things are important, of course, but the little things, the everyday things are also what makes life livable, finding like a nice leather bag, or finding great clothes, finding a nice wholly baked bread, or whatever it is, even the mundane things are actually what define life much more than the big ones often. So I would never downplay that. And I think to your ultimate question about timelessness and importance, it's really, that's why it is so essential that you find your myth and your mission, because those are by nature timeless. That's the whole idea of as JP said, it's a shared dream, a collective dream, actually, as Campbell said, and that runs across time and cultures, and that's the point of it. But your product is just a manifestation thereof. It's important as such, but it shouldn't be just about the product. The product is just one manifestation, and there can be many others.
Yeah, and I can attest that Wolfgang can get very excited about the crust of a croissant. But your comparison with the surgeon, I want to get to that very briefly, because I get that question a lot from students and clients as well. You need to differentiate, or you can differentiate. There are products, obviously, like heart surgery or your internet connection, for example, or maybe the train service you're going to take later on today to commute, or whatever it might be, where the product performance is going to be very central and right front and center. And often your interaction is going to be very utilitarian, even though it can quickly then slip into an experience that goes way beyond that and be meaningful as well. Think of airlines and, how you feel about being a frequent flyer in their lounge and yada, yada, etc. But in many of the areas we're discussing, when you talk about fashion, when you talk about beauty, cosmetics, etc., when you talk about luxury, nobody needs a watch, right? They all have a watch in form of their smartphone in their pocket. So nobody needs that complicated wrist watch that breaks down all the time, is very expensive to maintain. All these products are about, we talked, identity, social belonging, status, etc., etc. And that is where, of course, that dream and what it projects and the values that you can buy into, etc., are way more important, or add very significant value, disproportionate value. So particularly of styling your life, creating a grammar and a language about who you are, your identity and your values. Yes, it's absolutely the mission and myth that trumps everything else.
Wonderful. Well, if we may have the last do and don't summary, that will be really the last question answered.
Remind us, what are the do's and don'ts about what?
Growth without end.
Wolfgang, come on, you need to do a do and don't.
Growth without end. I think, growth without end. I think one thing we already said is that you should always counterbalance every time you extend yourself in width or in height. So let's say the moment you sell yourself a bit cheaper or to a wider audience, i.e. create bridge lines and stuff like that, just make sure that you also pay into, or invest rather, in your core, in your myth and in your mission. So don't sell yourself out, because there's no way back. You know, that's a one-way street. You can do that if you want to milk yourself, but you also need to kind of invest if you want to have a brand and a myth for the long run.
One thing I remember from a long time ago, we probably said that last time 10 years ago, but, you know, be patient for volume and sales, but be impatient for profit, we told the finance folks, which means that, you know, don't use price discounts, etc., as a quick fix to growth and expansion. You know, you rather use patience, you know, in the growth rate on the volume, but be impatient when it comes to you know, profits.
Yeah, that's for the startup phase. Yes, the startup phase. But now, like once you're maturing and you have a business established, there is an extreme temptation to kind of and a pressure also to keep growing. And you can grow also qualitatively, as we're just learning as a society overall. You know, quantitative growth is there's natural limits, but when you can't grow quantitatively anymore, just grow qualitatively. And that's what you have to do as a brand. You should always invest in your quality, in your story, at the high end, as much as you do in the quantitative side of things.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been very insightful for me. I highly recommend anyone watching or listening to get this book, because not only will it allow you, if you're an entrepreneur, to think about your own brand, but just in general, it really allows you to look at brands from a very different angle and perhaps connect with them a lot better, because you know, I see this book as a roadmap. It really is principle based. It's not just a bunch of case studies put together. It really talks about things that are true and hold true for you know, perhaps hundreds, if not thousands of years, because they're based on, you know, human perception and how we are wired as people, human nature, so to say. Is there a particular platform where this book is available, or can we direct everyone to?
Reza, of course, it's a very exclusive platform, only available in very limited places. It's called amazon.com.de.uk.
Never heard of it.
Amazon.jp, okay, which is named after me. And there is, you know, we talked about rethinking prestige branding. It's kind of the philosophy, the framework. We've actually, based on all the requests from people like you, you know, we've actually created a guide, if you like. It's called Brand Elevation, where it is that trying as best as we can take you by the hand through a guide to lead you through. How do you create your mission? How do you create your myth? What is unselling? How do you do it? What are the steps 1, 2, 3? Who are your partners, etc.? So there is a framework in rethinking prestige branding, and there is a program or a guide in brand elevation that you can find on that exclusive Alibaba cave that we call Amazon.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you both for your time, and I look forward to speak to you again, and I'm curious about the second book. Will there be a third book as well?
Good question. Yes, there is some in the making, but we don't know when it's going to come out. But thank you, Reza. This was very interesting and fun. at the same time, which
Pleasure
actually
is
is
all
something
mine.
that you should always hold a maxim for your business as well. It should be interesting and fun, and if it doesn't anymore, it probably won't be for your customers either. So
Thank you. I appreciate it.